And if we look from Old Testament prophets, we see Ezekiel describing visions. He said the heavens open and he sees visions of God. Whirlwind comes out of the north. And what does he see? He sees these four living creatures, face of a man, face of a lion, face of an ox, face of an eagle. So there it is. There's your 4 seasons of the great year. He describes wheels within wheels, perceiving wheels within wheels. And these are the cosmic cycles. And their work was, as it were, a wheel in the middle of a wheel. And then if we turn to the New Testament, in Greek, we see St. John the Divine having his vision. And let's see, we'll just jump ahead here because we got a lot to cover. In the midst of the throne, round about the throne, were 4 beasts. The first like a lion, second a calf, the third a man, the fourth is a flying eagle. This is how they could symbolize this model of time, this model of the great year into these visions. Of course, what I'm saying is that behind the measure of time and the measure of space is an archetypal reality where these fundamental relationships are presented through in a level that's beyond time or space. What we're seeing, I think, here is a pattern of a higher reality that manifests itself down in our limited perspective as these patterns within space and cycles within time. But they're measured by the same numbers. And the imagery used has been consistent throughout. Excuse me, the Sphinx. Of course, the traditional myths of the Sphinx combine those same 4 creatures of the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the man. We're going to skip some of this. Hamlet's Mill, if you want, this should mention Hamlet's. We can't talk about the Great Year without talking about Hamlet's Mill, which was kind of the groundbreaking work on the idea of the Great Year and precession of the equinoxes, placing it upon a scientific footing. And as they say here early in their great tome, the task then was to discover from the remote past an utterly lost science linked to an equally lost culture, one in which anthropologists have seen only illiterate primitive man. The Greeks still had the old idea, but they asked themselves questions about it. What moved was the sky, but questions about the sky posed abstruse problems. The greatest one was, of course, the slow motion of the tilt of the sky, which went through a great year of 26,000 years. Hipparchus in 127 BC called it the precession of the equinoxes. There is good reason to assume that he actually rediscovered this, that it had been known some 1,000 years previously, and that on it, the archaic age based its long-range computation of time. Now, of course, this was considered controversial back in the late 60s when this work was published. I now believe myself that the determination of the great year in the precessional cycle actually has its roots so deep that it goes way back into the former ice age, back deep into the Pleistocene somewhere. Oh, thank you, Linda. You know, Linda, there's an extra chair right here. Can you see back? I don't want you to miss anything. Okay. Thank you, Linda, for this. Okay. The equinoctial points, and therefore the solstitial ones too, do not remain forever where they should in order to make celestial goings-on easier to understand, namely at the same spot with respect to the sphere of fixed stars. Instead, they stubbornly move along the ecliptic in the opposite direction to the yearly course of the sun, that is, against the right sequence of the zodiacal signs. This phenomenon is called precession of the equinoxes, and it was conceived as causing the rise and cataclysmic fall of ages of the world. Now, this is where it ties into being something more than just a simple abstraction in the archaic mind, is because I believe that there actually is an earthly response to these changing cycles. And we do now, of course, know, based upon cutting-edge earth science, that catastrophe has been a major ongoing part of life on planet Earth since the record of life on Earth began. we've certainly come a long way in the last generation towards recognition of the fact that things change and can change catastrophically sometimes and on a global scale. When a lot of us were probably being educated in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the prevailing paradigm of earth change was that it was smooth and continuous and uniform, gradual, and anything that was proposed to be, catastrophic or short-lived was considered anathema and fringe science, and only nutcases like Velikovsky and others would propose this. Of course, we've come a long way since then in understanding that the history of the earth can be profoundly catastrophic, where modern science, I don't think, has yet caught up with archaic sciences in the recognition that there's a periodicity to these changes. And I think this is one reason why archaic societies and cultures all over the world considered this information and this knowledge so extremely important, was because it basically told us just to think about an agricultural community. How important would it be to know the cycles of the seasons, when to plant, when to sow? I mean, it would be totally vital to your survival as a society. When we look at the larger scale, we find the same principle at work. For the long-term duration of any civilization, a recognition of these great cycles and where we are in those great cycles is absolutely mandatory. But you see, we kind of got lulled into a false sense of complacency by the scientific view. The 20th century, which is actually a 19th century worldview inculcated by modern geological science, that all change is uniform. In fact, the term describing the geological paradigm for earth change has always been uniformitarianism. And literally, right up until the 70s, if you read a geological textbook, it'll describe all the change we see out there as the cumulative result of change that occurs one drop of water and one grain of sand at a time. And that model of earth change is completely obsolete. And yet we go forward as if we, humans, were the only perturbing factor within the terrasphere. I call it the terrasphere to refer to the biosphere, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the lithosphere, all combined. Of course we're having an effect, but we are not having an effect within the perspective of the natural changes that have come down over the last few 100,000 or few million years. There have been transitions and changes and this is well documented now, and I have it in numerous of my programs, that far exceed anything we have yet managed to accomplish in terms of perturbing the environment. Again, not to say that we shouldn't walk lightly on the planet. We should. However, we need to have a perspective and realize that, yes, if the uniformitarian worldview was the accurate one, was the correct one, then of course, yes, the things that we're doing to the planet would probably be unprecedented in terms of the kinds of forces that have caused planetary change. But the uniform model of Earth change is, like I said, totally obsolete. Totally obsolete. Let's proceed on. This is still from Hamlet's Mill, talking about the Nordic traditions of the twilight of the gods is understood as the world's end, yet there is unambiguous testimony to the contrary from the Voluspa and other chapters of the Edda. What actually comes to an end is a world, in the sense of a world age. The catastrophe cleans out the past, which is replaced by a new heaven and a new earth, and ruled by a new pole star. So when was the last great global catastrophe? When was the last global catastrophe? When, what?
5,000 years ago.
How much?
5,000.
When was the last great mass extinction in the zoological record? Who said, what did we hear? What did you say?
About dinosaurs?
The dinosaurs, yes. But the dinosaurs were 65 million years ago. Way back. We could count that